Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and just a few hours ago, a new PTR build went live, which brought with it the announcement of both Drain Soul and Nightfall buffs for Affliction Warlocks. Now, the actual nerf to Deathbolt that you see here was announced a few weeks ago, and has been on PTR for a bit now through pretty much all of the raid testing. Now, if you've been watching stream recently, I've mentioned a lot lately that I would be really surprised if they did not address the other two talents in the 15 row, being Drain Soul and Nightfall, particularly due to the reasoning behind the Deathbolt nerf, and also due to the fact that they are, or well, I guess they were, absolutely terrible. Thankfully, we can safely say that is indeed no longer the case. There are some preliminary sims from the Warlock Discord, which I will link in the description below. However, I believe the APLs for Drain Soul and Nightfall are still being optimized, which sadly I don't really have the knowledge to help with. I will also place a link to my Twitch in the description if you're interested in any weak auras or profiles you see here. Now, even post-nerf, Deathbolt was still our strongest option in the 15 row due to how poorly Drain Soul had been tuned since literal alpha, and Nightfall had also been lackluster. With these changes being announced though, both Drain Soul and Nightfall are indeed better options than Deathbolt damage-wise on PTR for 8.3. Each talent comes with a few unique interactions and such which make it stronger and, at times, weaker in certain scenarios than its newly buffed counterpart. Let's start off by talking about Drain Soul. The change to Shadowbolt from Drain Soul as Affliction's main filler spell was a change made in BFA pre-patch, and personally to me felt like a pretty big loss of identity for Affliction. I was excited initially to play with Shadowbolt after having multiple Drain-based tiers, but one of the largest issues that emerged, at least in my opinion, outside of Drain being insanely undertuned, was the fact that shard sniping was no longer a thing. Even in Mythic Plus or fights with ads present, Drain Soul was still a horrendous option simply due to how drastically undertuned it was. That, however, thankfully is no longer the case. The 50% damage buff to Drain Soul both makes it a strong single target option for raiding, as well as a strong option in Mythic Plus for both damage and shard sniping. Now, the Mythic Plus part is also partially due to how Nightfall works with multiple targets, but we'll get to that in a bit. It's also important to remember that Drain Soul in BFA has an execute baked into it, and the 50% damage buff does indeed affect that aspect as well. It might not necessarily be Death's Embrace or as strong as other execute options certain classes have, but we do have a functioning execute back once again. Now, one of the more interesting interactions with Drain Soul revolves around the Shadow's Embrace talent for Affliction, which is in the same row as Haunt. Previously, with Deathbolt as their only real option, it took 3 Shadowbolt casts to reach the full 9% bonus damage that Shadow's Embrace brought with it on one-target fights. Saying each Shadowbolt cast is roughly 1.7 seconds, and accounting for travel time, it took roughly 6 seconds to reach the full 3 stacks. With Embrace being a 10-second debuff, you also had to account for travel time of a Shadowbolt to refresh it. While this was typically not an issue for single-target fights, we never really played it there anyways due to Haunt being a better option. Now, however, with Drain Soul being our best option, it takes us a mere 2.5 to 3 seconds or so to reach the full 9% buff on a target, and each Drain Soul tick grants you 1 stack. You also only need 1 tick to refresh Shadow's Embrace, which is typically a channel of 1 second or less depending on procs. This opens up our options on 2 target or council based fights where maintaining a full 3 stack of Shadow's Embrace on multiple targets might not be the hardest thing to do anymore. All it really requires is a 2 to 3 second drain on each target to reach max stacks, and then a 1 second drain to refresh every so often. Even if your Embrace debuff drops, it only takes a few seconds to reach that max 9% bonus damage once again, making it a pretty forgiving talent as well in multi-target scenarios. While I have not experimented with this in Mythic Plus as of yet, I feel strongly that with Drain Soul's damage buff being very real and it bringing shard sniping back into play, we might see a shakeup in certain builds if you're actually running Aff in Plus for some reason this season. Now, I don't want to necessarily get too caught up in the Drain Soul buffs, even though they're really spicy, as Nightfall also received a relevant buff that makes it a strong option for us as well. The damage of our Nightfall-based Shadowbolt procs was increased by an additional 25% from where it currently is on live, for a total of 50% damage. They also buffed the proc rate on Nightfall by 33%, thus giving it an average of 4 RPPM, up from 3. Now, while Nightfall might seem like an amazing talent for Mythic Plus due to having multiple targets present at once, I unfortunately have some pretty bad news. Nightfall's proc rate does not scale with having multiple targets with Corruption active on them. This means that whether you have a total of 8 targets with Corruption on them or a mere 1, you will still have the same 4 RPPM. Obviously, this is not set in stone that you will have exactly 4 procs every 60 seconds specifically, but over the course of multiple iterations, that should be just about the average whether you have 10 targets or 1 target with corruption on it. Now, I could see Nightfall being a potential option on fights like Shadhar and Ny'alotha that has a good bit of movement present, while also not having any adds to snipe shards off of. You do have to take into account the loss of Drain Soul's execute as well on a case-by-case basis, but if there's a lot of movement present, how much value will you truly get from Drain Soul? Now, looking ahead to 8.3 in Ny'alotha, there are a total of 12 bosses, 8 of which seem to have adds present that can essentially be used for shard sniping value with Drain Soul. Obviously, bringing back an execute of any form adds even more value to Drain Soul, but other factors need to be taken into consideration as well. I, for one, am pumped the CR15 talent row finally being addressed, as we've gone a very, very long time without any other real options besides Deathbolt. Having Drain Soul back, for me, is going to feel awesome, and even though it does not bring actual Death's Embrace with it, being an execute class in a sense also brings extra value. I am also pretty excited to maybe get some spicy Shadow's Embrace play in on PTR once these changes actually hit. Hopefully they will be implemented before raid testing this Thursday and Friday, although I would not be surprised if they wait until next week's major PTR build. Let me know what you think of these changes in the comment section below, and whether you're more excited to actually play with Nightfall or Drain Soul, or I guess technically Deathbolt is still an option. If you guys want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons, as your support really helps. Thanks guys, and I'll see y'all again soon on stream. Peace.